joining us with the news that the former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. It is 7 a.m. here on the East Coast in New York City. Good morning, everyone. I'm Errol Barnett, and we continue with our breaking news coverage of the death of former Vice President Dick Cheney. News breaking within the past hour that he has died at the age of 84. Now, we can show you a statement his family released a short time ago saying, quote, the former Vice President died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. It goes on to say, Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. Fly fishing was a favorite hobby of the former vice president. CBS News' Major Garrett brings us more now on Cheney's life and legacy.
In 2000, Dick Cheney was asked by George W. Bush to help pick his running mate. In the end, it was Cheney's name that rose to the top of the list.
He really wanted me to come on board because he thought I could help govern, be part of his team, and that he wanted me involved in everything.
Richard Bruce Cheney was born in 1941 in Lincoln, Nebraska, and grew up in Wyoming. He married his high school sweetheart, Lynn, with whom he had 2 daughters. In his late 20s, he moved to Washington, D.C., where he became President Gerald Ford's chief of staff at age 34. In 1978, he won his first of 6 terms in the U.S. House, representing Wyoming.
I take this obligation freely.
He became Secretary of Defense for President George H.W. Bush in 1989, overseeing the U.S. victory in the First Gulf War. In 1995, Cheney became CEO of Halliburton, the world's largest oilfield services company. It made him a multimillionaire. In 2000, he left the company to join the Republican ticket.
This election is about real choices, that we are talking about the future of our nation.
The bitter presidential contest was decided in Bush and Cheney's favor by a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court. The September 11, 2001 attacks were the defining moment for the new administration. As the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan, Cheney also urged military action against Iraq.
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
Baghdad fell just 3 weeks after the U.S. invasion in 2003, but the alleged weapons of mass destruction were never found, and American forces began a long, deadly occupation. Even so, the Bush-Cheney team made national security the centerpiece of the 2004 re-election campaign.
Because if we make the wrong choice, then the danger is that we'll get hit again.
They won in a close election, but as the situation in Iraq disintegrated and U.S. casualties mounted, public opinion turned against the administration.
George Bush has got to go!
Cheney suffered multiple heart attacks, his first at age 37. He received a new heart in 2012.
You wake up every morning with a smile on your face because you've got a new day you never expected to have.
Dick Cheney, a man who was both soft-spoken and unyielding, became one of the most powerful vice presidents in American history. Major Garrett, CBS News, Washington.
We want to bring in Kevin Sheridan now. He's an advisor on the Romney-Ryan campaign from 2012 and also founder of the Sheridan Media Group. What do you make of this news of the passing of Dick Cheney, considering that he was a towering figure, often described as the most powerful vice president in modern American politics, and now his family says he's died at 84?
Yeah, it's hard to explain how important he was actually during those Iraq War days and, following 9/11. He was truly central to everything that America did to respond to 9/11. He's obviously received a lot of criticism since for it. And, he made a pivot in the end away from the current Republican Party. But he was crucial to really everything that happened in those days. He's a really towering figure, going all the way back to the 70s, where he was chief of staff, and he served in very key roles. He was tight with Donald Rumsfeld, obviously. So an important historical figure, and a lot of history books will be written on him.
You know, there is an entire generation of Americans who were not alive on 9/11, or perhaps were so young it is but a distant memory. It truly changed the course of the country. Help people watching remember how Dick Cheney's approach and influence during the George W. Bush years helped shape policy that was passed vis-a-vis the Patriot Act and other initiatives post 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, he took a maximalist view that, and a lot of us who lived through it agreed with him at the time that, look, if there's a 1% chance that we're going to get hit by weapons of mass destruction, a nuclear bomb or a dirty bomb or something, in our major American cities, then we have to take every measure possible to counteract it. And that was the argument that won the day at the time. I mean, 78 or so senators, I think, voted for the Iraq War. It's hard to explain if you weren't there what the feeling in this country was at the time. It was a very maximalist feeling that we have to take the fight to the terrorists. And we're still living in the wake of that now. And the Republican Party has largely turned away from that view completely now. But that was at the time, that was the argument that won the day.
And I think part of the reason there was so much criticism of Cheney's position post 9/11 is that earlier in his political career, and he had been a Washington key player for decades, for many Republican administrations, Cheney did say, I remember this being a clip that would kind of play in high rotation at the time that Cheney was being criticized for his position of going into Iraq, taking out Saddam Hussein, and eliminating the possibility that Hussein could develop weapons of mass destruction. There was a clip from him back in 1992 when he was on CBS's Face the Nation, where he was asked about that possibility during the first Iraq War. If we remember, George H.W. Bush made a decision to go in the early 90s to push Iraq out of Kuwait. And at the time, Cheney said, quote, if we had gone to Baghdad, if we have sort of accepted the responsibility for occupying the country, governing Iraq, putting a new government in place, running Saddam to the ground, there would be significant additional U.S. casualties. So in the early 90s, he had seen that going into Baghdad would have been a liability. He goes on to say, I can't see how many, but the proposition is how many additional American lives is Saddam Hussein worth? And in his view then, not very many. In the mid-90s, he becomes CEO of Halliburton, with the largest oil field services company. In 2000, he leaves that company to join the Republican ticket. And of course, 9/11 truly changes everything. And as vice president, he advocated for going into Baghdad to take out Saddam, which was done successfully. But the challenge was setting up a government to hold Iraq's various interests together. Why do you think he evolved on that thinking?
Because America constantly evolved on Iraq and Iran, and our entire Middle Eastern policy was a little schizophrenic. Actually, we were not partners with Saddam Hussein, but we met with him, and we had we were tacitly, enjoying the fight between them and Iran at the time. So it was very bizarre. I mean, it's a complicated history, the 80s and into the 90s, when he finally, Saddam Hussein then got aggressive and went into Kuwait, and then we kicked him out of Kuwait. And that was, we shook off the Vietnam era feelings. And it provided, the 90s that felt good. We'd finally won a war, but it wasn't resolved. And so that hung over everyone's head for another 10 years. And then 9/11 happens and we go back in. So he's a reflection, I think, a lot of where the country was. The country has evolved right along with him. And whether he was the leading edge of it or whether he was reflecting it, the historians will have to tell us that, but or try to explain that. But yeah, we were all there, those of us who lived through it, and yeah, he was always a voice in it, though.
Kevin Sheridan, we appreciate your insight. Some really interesting points there as we digest the news that former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84.